Welcome to our workshop presentation. My name is John and I will be your host. The topic today is problems exist only in my imagination. Before I start, I just want to put into context what I'm going to be sharing about tonight. By no means am I downplaying or minimizing the fact that a lot of people go through very, very difficult and challenging times. And particularly at this particular moment in time, with the worldwide pandemic, people are really struggling and really, really experiencing serious problems. So I'm not minimizing or downplaying that fact. But what I would like to do tonight is just to present some ideas and thoughts that will contribute towards reducing the levels of anxiety and stress. So this topic might not make much sense right now, but as we progress, it will become clearer. A problem is a problem because I am calling it a problem. And as you can tell by the little man at the bottom there, what the hell are you saying? How can you say that a problem is simply a problem because I am calling it a problem? Well, the truth is that I can only experience a situation as a result of the meaning that I give it. In other words, the way I describe the situation, my story about the situation, my interpretation of the situation, the clever people call it my narrative, causes my nervous system to respond biochemically, and I then experience the feelings and the emotions. So if I look at a situation and I interpret it as negative, as stressful, as unwanted, as unfair, I am going to experience the emotions that relate to that story in my head, that relate to my interpretation of the situation. Now, by no means, again, am I saying that we should go into denial and practice positive thinking and only think positive thoughts when things go wrong. But we're going to look at some tools and techniques that will help me to find a way to reframe my interpretation of the situation that can help me to have a more empowering, if I can put it that way, experience, and that can help me to then look for solutions and look for answers. A very, very important principle to understand, and this is not just my opinion, this is based on neuroscience and psychology. I create what I experience through a meaning-making and feeling-making process in my mind. And this is basically what I referred to a few minutes ago. The way that I describe the situation directly causes my emotions and my feelings. So what that implies purely from a scientific point of view, that no person or no situation can directly cause me to feel a specific way. Any external factor can only trigger a story in my head, and the story in my head is the result of beliefs that I may hold about myself, about the world, about life, about people. It may trigger memories from past experiences. It triggers the associated emotions then. And I'm going to really labor this point because it's really important that we understand that. External factors, situations, events, or people only contribute around about 10% towards my experience. The other 90% is the direct result of the meaning-making process that then creates the feeling-making process. So purely from that perspective, I create my own experience. I determine the level at which I experience a situation, how positive or how negative for that matter. Everything is mindset. Everything is mindset. Mindset meaning the way that I think, my attitude towards situations, my beliefs as I intimated, and then the resulting emotions. Everything is an interpretation, a perception. There's a saying in psychology, we do not see the world as it is, but as we are. If I come across a situation, that situation triggers either a positive response in me or it triggers a negative response in me, depending on the psychological filters that I developed over years since childhood or since birth, basically. And that determines how I, well, to a large extent at least, determines how I process the situation, the meaning I give it, and the meaning that I then project onto that situation, and the way that I experience that situation. My mindset, my collection of thoughts and beliefs that shape my thought habits. Now, for most people, it is pretty much a default reaction when something goes wrong. When something is triggered that we interpret or process as negative, is pretty much a survival mechanism that is triggered, and we look at the situation and we describe it as negative. And that triggers various parts of my nervous system and my brain. That triggers the need for defense or for the fight, flight, or freeze response via a structure in my brain called the amygdala. So everything that I experience is the result of mindset and various electrical and chemical process in my nervous system and in my brain.
There are two types of mindset we can cultivate. One that embraces problems as opportunities to learn, and one that avoids them, often out of fear to fail. People that avoid conflicts can be described as having a fixed mindset. Those who see problems as interesting challenges have a growth mindset. Sometimes we like to switch from one to the other. People have a fixed mindset because they believe that basic qualities like intelligence or talents are fixed traits, and that these traits are responsible for success. They often like to document past achievements. With a growth mindset, people believe that new abilities can be developed through practice. This view creates the love for learning that most great leaders and artists have in common. For them, life becomes an exciting journey with endless opportunity to figure out new things and advance. To develop a growth mindset, Dr. Carol Dweck, the Stanford University professor who coined the term, advises leaders, teachers, and parents to celebrate trying. Teachers should applaud students for any grade if they studied hard. Parents should encourage their children to develop any new skill they are interested in. Doing this will make them learn the skill of learning, which will also help them back in the classroom. To illustrate the difference in everyday life, let's observe two imaginary kids. Jay thinks you've either got it or you haven't. Anne knows that she can learn anything if she wants it enough. At physical exercise, Jay avoids challenges. When it's time to jump over the vaulting horse, he's afraid to look stupid and be laughed at. Anne embraces any challenge. It's exciting, it's fun. She knows that failing is part of learning, and if she tries hard, at the end, nobody will laugh at her. Jay avoids feedback. If the teacher tells him how to improve an assignment he has been working on, he takes it personally. Anne knows that to improve, she needs to listen to constructive criticism. She also understands that it's not her that is being assessed, but the results of her work on that one day. Jay always takes the easy road. For example, he likes escalators and hates to take the stairs. When he is practicing the guitar, he stops the moment he's getting stuck. Anne usually doesn't even take escalators. She jumps up the stairs, counts every step in her head, and enjoys feeling the blood rushing through her veins. She practices the drums every morning for 15 minutes. Not that she always enjoys it, but she knows that effort is part of a journey to a more fun life. Anne likes to see others succeed. It inspires her. She knows that if she motivates her friends to get better, she herself is likely to grow too. If his friends try new things and succeed, Jay feels threatened. He's afraid that their success will put pressure on him to do more with his life too. Modern companies look for employees with a growth mindset because they solve problems and persist despite obstacles. To spot the right ones, some ask during the interview whether the job applicant believes if managers are born or if management is a skill learned. Jay thinks that managers are born. Anne gets the job. Neuroscientists support the idea. They confirm that the brain grows like any other muscle in the body, with training. Studies show that adopted twins tend to have higher intelligence compared to their siblings who stayed with their biological parents. The difference appears to come from the higher educational levels of adoptive parents and shows that nurture is more important than nature. A simple switch in how a person views a situation can mean the world of difference. Not just the outcome of that situation, the outcome of that person's place in life. As the late poet Samuel Beckett once said, "Ever tried? Ever failed? No matter. Try again. Fail better." What do you think about the concept? Is it overly simplistic? And if you buy the idea, do you believe it is possible to make a permanent switch from a fixed to a growth mindset?
A fixed mindset and a growth mindset. In simplistic terms, a fixed mindset is when I'm stuck in my way of thinking, stuck in my beliefs, stuck in my conditioning, stuck in seeing problems as bad, as unacceptable, and as a result I complain, I blame, I resist, I fight, and all that really implies is that I'm just purely reactive from a conditioned set of beliefs and thought patterns. Growth mindset, on the other hand, is when I get to the place where I start to think or practice critical thinking, when I start to question things, when I start to question my own thought patterns, my beliefs, where I start practicing becoming a bit open-minded that there may be other ways of looking at the same thing. I may be able to reframe my narrative. I may be able to tell myself a different story. And it's really the difference between closed-mindedness and open-mindedness. And that last question, is it possible to move from a fixed mindset to growth mindset? Absolutely, 100% possible. How do I know that? Because I've experienced that in my own life, and I also see it virtually on a daily basis with the clients that I work with. How does mindset develop? What causes us to develop certain patterns? A very, very important principle that we're going to look at right now. My brain shapes itself around my predominant thinking and feeling through neuroplasticity. The shape of my brain, and I literally mean that the physical shape, the structure of my brain, is literally the result of my lifelong thinking and associated feelings that cause patterns in my brain, that cause connections in my brain. And those patterns, also known as neural pathways, form neural networks. And I literally develop all those patterns through my continued thinking, my continued focus, and as I said, the associated feelings, and then the way that I behave. Neuroplasticity is just the ability of the brain to change, to grow, to make new connections. It was believed up until about 20 years ago that by the time you turn 18, the brain has pretty much developed its peak, and whatever development has taken place, whatever patterning has taken place is there for life, and not much you can do to change that. And then they discovered neuroplasticity, my ability to continue causing changes in my brain structure, changes in patterning in my brain. And how do I do that? Through consciously practicing to think differently. And in the process over time start to change the core beliefs, because all my beliefs were really formed through constantly thinking the same kind of thing over and over. Psychologists generally agree that we have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts per day going through our minds. And of course, most of those thoughts we're not consciously aware of. But the interesting fact is that they estimate around about 90% of the thoughts are repeat thoughts, the same thoughts that we thought the day before, reactive thoughts, thoughts of blame and criticism, unless I am the exception to the rule and I practice positive thinking. And by positive thinking, I simply mean to think positively towards negative situations. So we can see how easy it is for us to get stuck in mindsets. And unfortunately, the majority of people appear to be stuck in negative, limiting, self-sabotaging, and unresourceful mindsets. Neurons that fire together wire together. It's referred to as Hebb's law, and this is just a scientific explanation of if I practice something over and over, or if I think the same way over and over, any kind of repetition over time causes certain neurons in the brain to fire, and fire meaning there are electrical and chemical processes that take place within the various neurons in response to what I'm doing. And the more I continue with the same practice, the more those neurons start to connect, and they then start to form pathways and networks. And that is basically what psychologists also refer to as the subconscious mind. Those patterns that I develop in my brain through repetition, all the information within those patterns, within those pathways, are also programmed as beliefs within my subconscious mind. So the physical aspect of beliefs and thought patterns would be the neural pathways, and the emotional, psychological equivalent of those patterns would be my beliefs that are programmed into my subconscious mind. And psychologists agree that those patterns in my brain and those beliefs in my subconscious mind determine up to 90% of my behavior. Now, if you were anything like me, where from a very young age I was conditioned towards negativity, that life was unfair, that you can't trust anybody, that bad things happen in three and all that kind of BS, I really internalized all those beliefs. So you can imagine how I viewed what may be perceived as negative situations or challenges whenever they came my way. That I purely reacted out of mindset when I had to face whatever challenges came our way. So we understand now that our patterning, our conditioning is largely responsible for how we react or respond to situations. And if I have had a lot of negative conditioning with limiting beliefs and negative views and perspectives on life, I will be far more inclined to have a far more negative response to situations that I encounter. And I may be far more inclined to develop a negative narrative of hopelessness and helplessness and blame and resistance. And my nervous system responds to that by releasing a whole range of stress hormones. And I then experience all the negative emotions that makes the problem even worse than maybe what it was originally when I encountered it. So how do I develop a more resourceful mindset? How can I start to change the patterning that will help me to be more objective when I encounter challenging situations? Well, first of all, number one, acknowledge and accept the current situation. And that is a very difficult concept for a lot of people, and that was for me in the early days. Anything that I resist will persist. Anything that I fight against, complain about, blame others for, I will create more of and I will experience more of simply because my focus remains on whatever the situation is. So by acknowledging the situation and by acknowledging, just seeing it for what it is, and be honest about the emotions that may be evoked inside of me. Right now I feel frustration, right now I feel anger, right now I feel a level of hopelessness or helplessness, but I understand that fighting, resisting, blaming, complaining will only make the situation worse. So I'm going to accept it for what it is, and that simply means I'm going to give it permission to be the way it is right now. From a neurological cognitive perspective, the more I resist and fight and complain and blame, the more my brain releases stress hormones, the more negative I feel, but not only does it impact or impair my emotional state, it also causes what is referred to as hypofrontality in the brain, where the logical, reasonable prefrontal cortex that I need to make decisions, to evaluate, to analyze, becomes impaired, and I literally cannot see the wood for the trees. I am unable to see solutions even if they should stare me in the face. And the stress causes me then to maybe behave irresponsibly, make unnecessary mistakes, and I just exacerbate the problem. Number two, once I've acknowledged and accepted the current situation, I need to shift my focus from what is to what I prefer. Because as I said, as long as I focus on what is, I will keep creating more of what is. This is not what I want. This is not what I want to experience. What else do I want? What other experience would I prefer as opposed to this one? It's not necessarily what other situation would I prefer. It's more what else do I want to feel? What else do I want to experience? And it's really important that I then start to focus my attention towards what it is that I want to experience as opposed to what it is I'm experiencing at the moment. Number three, start to imagine the visuals and the feelings of the wish fulfilled, as is referred to by Neville Goddard, an incredibly powerful spiritual teacher. The feelings of the wish fulfilled. In other words, when I experience this change in circumstances or situation, when I experience the fulfillment of a desire, what would my life look like? What would I feel? What will I experience? And it's important to engage as many as possible of the five senses in this imagination of what it would be like to experience the shift. It is important to create the image and the pictures, but it's far more important to create the feelings, because our feelings or our emotions have magnetic electrical vibrations that we emit, and we then manifest, attract, and create different circumstances. And I really, really am witness to this, in that I've applied this in my own life for many, many years, and I really, really was able to change my life as a result of this. So really start to take time out and really go into the feeling and the pictures and the images of what it would be like to experience that shift and that change. Number four, start to ask power questions. Move from why to what and how. It is pretty common that people tend to ask the why question more than anything else. Why does this always happen to me? Why do I always have to suffer? And of course, that just creates more negative emotions, and it creates more doom and gloom. But if I change that into what is happening, what do I need to do to bring about this change, the change that I desire? How do I go about to create a different experience? It changes the chemistry in the brain, and that change in the chemistry in my brain also helps me to think more clearly. And it's amazing how the brain then starts to find answers and solutions, and also become more clear-minded to hear maybe people making suggestions, or I see or hear something that gives me ideas. And it's an incredibly powerful process, simply when I change the questions that I ask. From there, turn the problem into a challenge. The problem always seems insurmountable. The problem always tends to make me feel hopeless and helpless. But after going through that process, I am now able to look at the problem as a challenge. In other words, this is something that I can tackle. It is something that I can find a way to overcome. Can you see now, going back to the topic, that problems are in my imagination? My imagination, the story that I tell myself, the picture that I hold in my head about the situation, the emotions that result. And when I start to change that imagination, when I start to change that story in my head, when I start to reframe, and we're going to look at some examples of reframing, I'm able to turn what was a problem into a challenge. And the amazing thing is that also contributes to reprogramming my subconscious mind and repatterning the brain. And I start to develop this new growth mindset. Number six, the new mindset will start to create and produce new opportunities. And In my personal experience, most opportunities that came our way came out of nowhere, unexpected. When I re-looked at the way that I was describing problems, when I started to look at the current problems I was facing as situations that were created, some of the causes that created the situations I may have been responsible for, most of them I was not responsible for, but whatever I was experiencing in my life became my responsibility in what am I going to do about it right now. And when I started to reframe my story about the situations that I was facing, and I started to turn my problems into challenges, the opportunities just came along. And I think the reason why the opportunities came along are manifold, in that, as I mentioned before, I become more clear-minded, I become more open-minded, I hear more, I see more, and I'm also more willing to consider other options. And it's just amazing, amazing how things start to change. Something that I learned a number of years ago: I will never go beyond what I think, imagine, or feel. And again, that story that I tell myself, the picture that I hold in my head about myself, about the world, about people, about life, about my future, and the feelings that result from that, I will never go beyond that. And one of the reasons for that is that the patterning in my brain and the programming in my subconscious mind seem to work together to continuously create situations to prove what I believe to be true, and or causes me to behave in ways that I keep creating the same situations and the same scenarios over and over again. And I may have wonderful goals, I may go to workshops, I may go to seminars, I may learn amazing goal-setting strategies, I may be able to really be clear on what it is that I want to achieve in my life. But until I address my thinking, my beliefs, until I address the imagination in my head, my pictures of what it is that I want and the associated feelings, I will keep going back to what I refer to my default settings, and I will keep creating the same situations over and over again. Your limitation is only your imagination. What goes on in my mind will either promote me towards what it is that I want to achieve, or it will limit me to stay with what it is I may no longer want. Bob Proctor made the statement: the only limitation we have is weakness of attention and poverty of imagination. Such a powerful saying. Limitation, boundaries that keep me stuck. Weakness of attention, in other words, how focused I am on what it is I want to achieve or what it is that I'm paying attention to. As long as my attention remains on what is, on the current situation, as long as my attention remains on what it is I no longer want to experience, as long as my attention remains on what it is that I'm resisting, I'm going to keep creating more and more of the problems that I'm trying to solve. And the weakness of attention, as long as I fail to focus my attention on what it is that I want, what it is that I want to experience, what it is that I want to move towards, what it is that I want to achieve in my life, and I create those narratives and I create those imaginations and I create those feelings, if I don't really, really pay attention to all that, I'm going to continue to experience limitation. And the poverty of imagination, the same thing. As long as I imagine negativity and limitation, and I keep carrying the pictures in my head about the past and about failures, as opposed to starting to imagine, creating pictures and feelings of what it is that I want, I will remain stuck in those limitations. Tony Robbins said, wherever your attention goes, energy flows and results show. So whatever I focus on, I feed energy, mental energy, emotional energy, vibrational frequencies at a quantum mechanical, quantum physical level that will either create more of what it is that I'm focusing on that I don't want, where it will start to create more of what I'm focusing on that I would prefer. And the results will be the byproduct. The law of cause and effect says whatever it is that I'm experiencing are the results or the outcomes or the effects of previous causes that created whatever it is that I'm experiencing right now. And as long as I focus on the effects, all I'm doing is I'm creating new causes that will create the same effects. So when I start to shift my focus and I start to change my imagination and I start to change my story and I start to change my feeling and I start to focus more on what it is that I want, what I do then is I create new causes that will create new effects. And if I can learn to implement these techniques with every single problem that I face, every single negative situation that I encounter, I promise you, I talk from personal experience and what I've observed, I am then able to create an amazing, amazing new experience for myself. Beware of the they say syndrome. What is the they say syndrome? I was with some very good friends the other day, and normally we really have a good time together, and they're also on a similar journey as me with regards to taking personal responsibility and creating the life that we want. But two of them were talking about the fact that, they say that bad things happen in three. So if a problem crops up or something goes wrong, I can expect two more negatives. And they say, number one, who are they? Number two, do they know what they're talking about? And if we take some time to think about all the they says that we've internalized as beliefs, that is absolutely just a load of BS. Either people regurgitating what they've been told, or they just repeat what they experience. And of course, if they keep regurgitating what they were told as beliefs, they're going to continue to recreate that. So it's important that we move away from they say to I say. I'm going to start to make different statements. I'm going to start to have a different opinion. I'm going to start to create different responses towards situations. And no longer am I going to remain stuck in people's opinions and people's experiences and just recreating other people's beliefs that I internalized from a young age. The they say syndrome, I'm going to completely eradicate in my life. And I'm going to start to determine what I experience based on what I'm saying, what I decide. The best starting point in addressing a problem is through acceptance. Now, I intimated it early on, but I just want to revisit that. And why? Because acceptance brings a sense of peace and serenity. Why? Acceptance stops me from fighting and resisting and creating more negative emotions and creating stress and impairing my ability to think clearly, and in the process creating more of what is. Acceptance helps me to become more clear-minded because I'm reducing the amount of stress hormones being released in my nervous system and my brain, and I'm encouraging the release of the so-called feel-good chemicals that actually help me to think more clearly and able to think, to change my thinking from problem-focused thinking to solution-focused thinking, and start to look at the problem as a challenge, and in the challenge start to create more opportunities. I can change a problem into a challenge by reframing my narrative from negative to neutral to positive. Now, what does that mean? Reframing is simply to tweak the story that I'm telling myself. And sometimes I may be facing a situation that is really causing very strong negative emotions inside of me because of the very negative narrative. It may be a very real situation. And as I said in the beginning, I'm not downplaying or minimizing anything, and I'm not saying that the story I'm telling myself is not true. It may be 100% true, but still, it is the story that I'm telling myself that is creating the experience that I'm having of the situation. And by reframing, sometimes it's too difficult to go straight from a painful narrative to a positive narrative, because that may imply that I'm in denial, or I'm not facing up to the reality of what is. So very often it's important that I move from acknowledging the painful situation to becoming more neutral, becoming more factual. An example that I always use, if somebody that I really care about and normally have a good relationship with me says something unkind or hurtful to me, my narrative may be something like, how could this person do this to me? I thought we were friends. How could they be so disrespectful? How could they hurt me like this? And of course, I'm going to feel the pain and the hurt that's associated with that. Now, for me to move to a positive narrative may be very difficult. However, if I can move from that negative, painful narrative to something more neutral or clinical or factual, Chris said something to me now that really, really caused me to think painful thoughts about it. And as a result, I really feel hurt. Far more factual, less emotional, more neutral, and it will cause the nervous system to reduce the amount of stress hormones that is being released, and I will experience some sense of relief from the negative emotion resulting from the original narrative. And I can practice that to try and make it as clinical as possible. And of course, the most clinical description of what happened between me and Chris would be Chris said something to me that I interpreted as unkind. That's really all that happened. How can I reframe that into something positive? Well, positive as in meaningful. There's some lesson in there. Let me ask Chris what made him say that. Or, wow, I just realized that I have a lot of stuff that can still get triggered inside of me when people say something to me. There's an opportunity for growth. And I understand that the meaning I gave the situation is what created the feeling. And that reframing, again, not only helps me to create a, if I can put it this way, a more bearable experience of the situation, but it also helps to retrain my thinking and to repattern my brain in how I respond to situations. Well, that's the end of our presentation tonight. If you related to some of the things that I said tonight and maybe you've got some questions, you're more than welcome to connect with me at john.ttklife@gmail.com. I offer a 30-minute free coaching session where you tell me what it is that you are looking for, and I'll tell you what it is that I offer, and you can then decide from there if it's something that you could use. I really want to encourage you to explore some of these principles that we spoke about in order to create the kind of life that you deserve, where you are able to take more control of your life experiences. And especially during this time, as I said in the beginning, where many people are facing a lot of uncertainty and stress because of what is happening in the world today. And if I can find the tools and implement the tools that can help me to look at things differently. Now, there's a saying, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at will change. So thank you for spending this time with me, and I wish you all the success on your ongoing journey of growth and development, and I really wish all the best. All the best.